My name is Sarah Smith. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am a professor of history at American River College, and today's date is April 7th, 2023. Okay, let's start off by establishing some of the basics. What's your full name? What are your pronouns? And what's your date of birth?
My full name is Ryal Edwin Strong. Pronouns are he, him, or they, them. And my date of birth is August 9th, 1980.
Tell me a little about yourself. What are your interests and hobbies? What do you like to do?
Interests and hobbies. I love plants. I love planting things. I love tea. I love crocheting, uh, gaming, pets. I love my cat. I'm just kind of a boring, crafty nerd.
Um, so, where did you grow up and where do you live now?
I grew up in Sacramento and I live in Sacramento now. I've moved all over California, but ended up back here.
So, where in California have you lived?
Vallejo, Lone Pine, Independence, Bishop, Darwin, Fortuna, Rio Del. I think that's it.
Where did you move a lot when you were a kid, or is this mainly as an adult?
All as an adult. I lived in Sacramento until I was 18.
Can you tell me how you identify with regard to your social identities, broadly speaking?
Broadly speaking, I am trans, I am queer, I am disabled. Um, those are my main identities.
Can you talk a little bit about your coming out experience? What was the process like figuring out your identities?
Uh, First came out as lesbian because I didn't have a word for trans. I didn't know that was a thing. So I came out as a lesbian in 1996 when I was 16. Actually, I think I came out as bi first. And I told my high school English teacher because I was pretty sure she was queer. But she wouldn't actually own that at the time. And I don't blame her, given that a teacher had recently been fired for being gay. And when I told my mom, she said, "Well, I knew that. You couldn't tell me. You couldn't give me a heads up." So my mom was very accepting. The rest of my family, not so much, but there was never any like overt homophobia. There was just kind of a quiet shun. I came out as trans in '99, and that didn't go over nearly as well with anyone. My mom didn't she didn't get mad. It wasn't a hate thing. She just kept asking me what she did to cause it, and I had to explain to her that no one did anything to cause it, but it just is. And then she did something that kind of astounded me and asked if she could go to counseling with me because she wanted to understand. Like it wasn't a you need therapy situation. It was I need therapy and I need you to help me understand this. So I went to counseling with her. I don't think she ever fully understood it, but she came to defend me when it was needed. From that point on, she never introduced me as anything but her son, and didn't matter how I looked. She just didn't matter how people looked at her when she said it either. She was amazing for that. The rest of my family refused to call me Ryal, refused to use my pronouns for many years. My sister still doesn't. My brother doesn't when I'm not around. My aunts have finally come around and usually get it right. Sometimes still misgender me despite how I look.
So, what was the process like when you first came out, as you said, bisexual and then lesbian? Said you were 16 at the time.
Mm.
So, how was that received by people around you, friends, teachers?
Most of my friends were surprisingly supportive. I was the first out queer at my school, I believe. And I was very surprised. I expected to get a lot of pushback, and I didn't from my friends. there was a lot of bullying from the people who weren't my friends, and that started before I even came out. They asked me very inappropriate questions about things that only someone who was with women would know. And I was like, how would I know? I don't know. And so it was a constant barrage of like subtle microaggressions. Like I said, before I even came out, and then it just continued after that. But it was never again overt. It was always very quiet hate.
And so, did you feel like you could go to teachers or staff at your school or talk to anybody about the bullying you were experiencing?
No, absolutely not. Any teacher that I thought might understand wasn't out. Right? Any teacher I thought was queer was they weren't safe. They didn't feel safe, so they certainly couldn't help me. And other teachers just didn't seem to care in general. And then when I came out, it was even more of a standoffish vibe from them. After I came out, one biology teacher told me I would never amount to anything. I would never be anything.
How did that make you feel at the time?
Very, very sad. I wasn't even anger. I was just sad. And so I gave up. Like, all right, you want to tell me that? I'll prove you right. You want to be right so bad. So I failed her class. I failed all of my classes that year. I left my junior year with a .07 GPA.
Do you think a major or big reason why you left was because of what that teacher said to you, or was it just that combined with everything else that was going on?
A big part of it was that teacher. And then there was a bunch of mental health issues happening because I was saying I was a lesbian, but it didn't feel right. It didn't feel like my identity. And I didn't have a word to describe what I was feeling. So I was very depressed, very anxious. And so when you add that to teachers not being supportive, I just stopped going.
And what did you do after you stopped going?
They threatened to arrest my mother for me being truant, and at the same time wouldn't let me come back for my senior year. So I had to go to a continuation school. And that's where I graduated from.
And you said you came out as trans not that long afterward. What, 3 years or something?
Yeah.
And so how did you figure out that you were trans?
I had a friend who came out as trans, and I had no idea that assigned female people were ever trans. Like, all I had ever seen was horrible talk shows with trans women being made a mockery. And then when I realized, wait, I can do that. Like, that's me. So it was really just the visibility of my friend that helped me understand who I was.
So you just needed one friend to kind of model what it meant to be trans.
Yeah. Just one visible person.
And how did you feel when you realized that you were trans?
Amazing. The trauma of growing up and being socialized as female is still there, but the depression lifted a bit, and it's kind of an indescribable feeling, I think, when you realize that who you are is a thing, right? That's valid. Your existence is real. What you feel is real. Like, you're not broken. You exist, and that's fine.
So when you came out as trans, can you describe what that meant for you? Like what do you mean when you say that you came out as trans? You came out as a trans man, as trans masculine, or?
I came out as a trans man. I told everyone that I was gonna transition. I told that, it was just a switch suddenly, and I'm sure it was not a surprise to some people and a huge surprise to others, because I had embraced my lesbian identity so hard, because I knew there was something, and if lesbian was it, then that was going to consume me. So for anyone that knew that, knew me in that way, they were probably shocked. But I think I just kind of said, "Hey, I'm trans. This is a thing. I'm going to be changing my name." I hadn't picked a name. I hadn't thought it through at all. I hadn't done any research. I was like, "This is me, and this is what's happening."
So now, when you think back on your childhood, do you see see lots of sort of signs that you were trans and you wish you would have come out sooner?
Oh, absolutely. Most of the pictures of me when I was a kid, I look like a little boy. You would not have guessed that I had been assigned female at birth. And I remember being a kid and everyone always asking my mom either about my gender or telling her, "Oh, your son is so cute," and she'd say, "Oh, that's my daughter." I'm not, but I don't have the words to identify that. And I remember the day I realized something was off. I was standing in a store and my mom had gone an aisle over, and this woman walked by me, and I think I was in her way. She put her hand on the small of my back and said, "Excuse me, young lady." And I froze, and that was my first panic attack because someone called me young lady. And I realized that like tomboy wasn't going to cut it anymore.
How old were you at that point?
I think I was about 11.
So, what does trans masculinity mean to you, and how would you distinguish it from cis masculinity, if you would?
That's an interesting question. I'm not sure that I would differentiate the two because I feel like masculinity is masculinity. And then there's the qualifier of cis and trans, which it kind of informs the way I was socialized. But I think masculinity is what it is, and it can be performed in a lot of different ways. But ultimately, the same goal is to be masculine. So I might differentiate between masculinity and toxic masculinity, but I think trans guys can have that too. So
Do you think the fact that you're trans shapes your masculinity? Like, does it give you particular insight into what it means to be masculine in a way that's not toxic?
yeah, absolutely. I think it does. At least for me, I can't speak for all trans folks, but I think for me, having the experiences I've had, having been like sexually assaulted and harassed and things as being identified as female, those are things you learn very quickly not to do when you transition. Right? And you also learn how incredibly ingrained they are in people assigned male at birth. Because people just assume I'm going to objectify women with them now, and I'm not. So yeah, it's my transition has definitely informed my masculinity and the way I perform it.
So, do you feel happy and empowered in your identity as queer, as trans, and you know, what do you think it took to get to this place? If you do feel happy and empowered,
I'm absolutely happy and empowered in my identity. I think saying I'm empowered though, that I don't feel like society as a whole empowers me. Right, that has to be me because society hasn't caught up. Hopefully they will, but I think we're going a little backwards right now. It's cost a lot, right, to be this happy in who I am and to feel any kind of power in who I am. Um, it's cost friends along the way, people who just didn't want to adapt. It costs family. Me and my sister don't really talk because she doesn't really want to use the right pronouns, and she'll get the name right most of the time, but it's been 20 years. Like, this is now a choice. It's no longer an accident. It's cost money, physical pain. I mean, the surgeries aren't particularly fun, but I wouldn't change those struggles. I mean, I would hope that nobody else has to go through all the things I went through, just like the people who came before me hoped that I wouldn't have to go through the things they went through. But I wouldn't change those because I like who I am right now.
So, if you feel comfortable talking about it, what was life like with your family growing up? Just in general.
My dad was somewhat abusive to my mother, and he took off when I was 5. He had an affair, got his girlfriend pregnant, and left. He walked out the door one day, never came back, and 2 days later, all his stuff was on the lawn. Um, and then it was just me and my mom for a few years. My sister and I weren't really close until I was about 7 or 8. I think she came to live with us. She's my half sister. She was with her dad. Um, she did not like me from the jump. Like there was, our relationship has always been strained because her father told her that our mom didn't love her anymore because she had a new baby, and that was me. So I understand the animosity she had towards me. I understand why she treated me the way she did when I was little. And my mom was always very supportive, but also a little overprotective and a little clingy. And I kind of parented her a little bit because of her depression. And, her husband just left her and she's trying to raise me and now my sister. And she's just been abused. Her whole family, I'm her sisters, but her parents abused her. And so she had struggles, and I ended up trying to pick up the slack for that and be there for her. But that's kind of hard when you're 6, right? You don't understand why you have to calm mom down because she's crying. But she always tried her best to make sure I had what I needed to have what I wanted. And she wasn't always successful, but she tried. And I don't think I could have asked for a more supportive parent. The rest of my family is kind of distant. I didn't know my brothers until I was in my 20s. I wasn't allowed to see them because of the whole dad girlfriend situation. And there was questions as to whether or not they were his, and it was just family drama all around. But I had my mom, and that was what mattered.
So, I know you said that your family, aside from your mom, did not respond to you coming out as trans the way that they should have. So, and you're not really in contact with your sister, but are you in contact with any other family members at this point?
I am in contact with 2 aunts and a couple cousins. One of my aunts originally had a hard time with me being queer of any kind. She, I I was trying to go to her son's first communion, and I wanted to go and be supportive and be a part of that, even though I'm not religious. And at the time, I think I had a mohawk and some piercings, and I said, hey, if this is a problem for me to go into the church like this, I'll take out my piercings, I'll shave off the mohawk, I'll do what I need to make sure that I'm not offending you or causing any problems within your religion. And she said, well, I don't want you to come at all. You have behavior problems. There's something wrong with you. I don't want you around me or my family. I didn't have behavior problems. I was queer, and that was the issue. I was actually remarkably well behaved at that time.
So, can you talk a little bit more about this religious stuff? So, you said she was religious. Were other members of your family religious, and do you think that shaped how they reacted to you?
Oh, absolutely. I was raised religious. I was raised in a Baptist house, and right around the time I came out, I also rejected religion, for myself at least. And my uncle said, "We love you, not your sin." And we were we were never quite the same after that. That relationship was immediately damaged because that just you're telling me that there's a part of me that isn't right. There's a part of me that your God doesn't love. So we were never close after that, and he's my my mom's sister's husband. And so the relationship with her wasn't ever right after that either. And growing up, on my dad's side, one of my aunts, my favorite aunt, was a lesbian, and she also kind of moved away from religion and also got shunned by her side of the family, my dad's side, for a long time. And so I connected with her, and then she died pretty early. And so the one person who backed me up on the no religion, on the queer, she was gone. And my mom was very, very religious when I was growing up. I had to go to Sunday school. I had to go to Bible study and 3 times a week, church every Sunday. She had me memorizing Bible passages. All I could listen to was religious music. And of all of my family, I think she was probably the most devout and somehow the most supportive still, which is surprising to me. But the rest of my family, they're still religious. But I think they try to find a way to reconcile their love for me with their religion. And I think some have been successful and others haven't.
How do you think your mom was able to reconcile her religious beliefs, her religiosity with your coming out, and how supportive she was?
Like, my mom had been divorced at that point twice and separated from my dad, and she grew up Catholic, so she had to kind of reconcile that. Right? She had to find a way to continue her faith and continue within a religion that said that wasn't okay, that it wasn't okay for her to leave the men who were abusing her. So I think once she was able to do that for herself, it was a lot easier for her to understand that there are circumstances, right? There are individual things within a religion that may not be accurate, that may not be something she needs to follow, but she can still follow the religion itself. And I think that's kind of where she landed. Ultimately, when she died a couple of years ago, she died as a pagan. So that was a huge change.
So you said that you stopped being religious at some point. Do you connect that to your queerness, your transness, or what do you think?
I think in part, yes, my queerness, and in part, a boyfriend I had in high school who wasn't particularly religious, and we would have conversations about religion, and I liked his way of looking at the world. I liked his way of looking at religion, and it made me think about what I really believe in, and why I believe it. And he encouraged me to question myself in general, not just religion, but everything. He was always encouraging me to find me and be me. So it was in part because of him that I came out, much to his dismay, I think. But
Were you in a relationship with him when you came out?
I was, and I came out as bi, and he, that was fine because then it didn't matter that I had a boyfriend. But when I realized well, I don't want to say I realized I was a lesbian. When I said I was a lesbian, that effectively ended our relationship, and he was not thrilled with that. It was not an issue with me being a lesbian. It was not an issue with me being queer. It was an issue of the relationship ending.
Did you grow up in a sort of a working class household, a poor household? What was your class background growing up?
I would say probably poor. My mom did, for most of my life, in-home daycare. Not a lot of money to be made there, I think, at least not in the 80s and 90s. I don't know what it is now. And she always, she would always give parents a break and always take less money as needed. There was not a lot of money. She always, like I said, she always made sure I had what I needed. She'd buy me new clothes and then take my old clothes. Because we were about the same height for a long time. She was very short. And I think even the day she died, I found, when I went and cleaned out her stuff, I found socks that were mine when I was 13. She still had them. She wouldn't buy herself new stuff because she was always trying to make sure she was taking care of me. So there's definitely poverty. I'm not sure I always knew how much money we had or didn't have. There might have been times where we had more. I probably wouldn't have known the difference because she tried so hard to make sure I didn't know. I think.
So when you think about growing up poor, is there anything else that comes to mind about what life was like? And I know that could be a hard question to answer because when you're a kid, it's hard to kind of register these things, right? But now that you're thinking back on it, have you reflected on sort of what it was like to grow up poor? Or
Yeah, it was. I mean, I was acutely aware of certain aspects of it. Like my clothes were purchased at Kmart, which I don't even know if that's a store anymore. But it was the joke, right? Oh, you're poor, you shop at Kmart, and so I was always teased about that. And I thought, as an adult, I wonder like these other kids were saying, "Oh, you got that shirt at Kmart. I saw that at Kmart." I'm like, "Well, what were you doing at Kmart if it's so bad?" But you don't realize that when you're a kid. You're just like, "Well, they know I'm poor. They know I'm wearing Kmart clothes. And, sometimes it was clothes my grandmother made, and those got me ridiculed a lot too. Um, so I think, yeah, there were little things that resulted in like me being teased a lot, and I recall eating a lot of rice and hot dogs, and other things that are not they don't have a lot of health value to them, but they fill you up. Um, and I think other kids would talk about their dinners or have these nice lunches at school, and I'm getting free lunch and getting picked on, and at some point you kind of realize that free lunch isn't a gift, right? It's something you were saddled with because you were poor. And as grateful as I was to eat lunch, it felt like a burden at the time.
so you were talking about how your family grew up poor. Do you think your family's class status shaped how they reacted to your queerness at all?
I'm not certain. Most of my aunts were definitely doing better than my mom was. They all owned homes. They all had what I thought were nice things, and I realized as an adult were just average things. We were just poor and had everything from a thrift store. Uh, so I'm not sure how much class might have affected their reaction to me. I know religion definitely played a part, and I'm not really sure where class and religion intersect. I'm sure it's somewhere in there, right? And their willingness to be accepting. Yeah, I don't honestly know.
So you have a partner, right?
I do.
What's your partner's name?
Ash.
And I know you're not in close contact with your remaining family, but do you feel like you could bring Ash around?
I could bring Ash to the two aunts I still associate with for sure. They've actually asked questions about Ash and taken an interest, and they've accepted past partners. Those were typically assigned female folks who identified as female. Um, a little bit harder, I think, with Ash and the they them pronouns. I've gotten a lot of questions from my aunts on that, and I guess in theory I could take Ash to my sisters if we were close. My sister accepted my girlfriends previously, but it's kind of a weird acceptance in that she's not accepting me as a trans man. She's not accepting Ash as a non-binary person. She's accepting us as essentially a lesbian couple, I think.
So have you had the experience of family members referring to partners as not fully acknowledging that your current partner or your previous partners were actually your partner? Like, have you had the experience of people referring to your partner as a friend?
Yes, but not my family. My ex's family used to refer to me as the friend. So I'm glad that my family never did that. I mean, I can't recall a time that they did that, at least. If they did, it didn't stick with me. It didn't get much attention from me. So, um, but I have been the friend.
Do you think the fact that you grew up poor made it any more difficult to come out? Do you think there's any relationship there?
I think growing up poor, I don't know if this is accurate, but it seems in my head that there there's going to be one of two extremes coming out into like a poor family, and that's it's going to be readily accepted, or it's going to be completely not accepted. And I'm not sure why I get that feeling, but I do, and now I'm curious to find out if that's accurate. um, I think I was lucky in that my house was just me and my mom, so I was accepted. But it could have easily been any one of my other family members' house and been homeless at 16. Um, and they were a little bit better off in class. So I don't know.
So you said that you lived at home until 18 and
Yeah.
then you left home. So why did you leave home?
I joined the California Conservation Corps. I wanted to do something. I wasn't working. I wasn't being productive. I dropped out of actually Sacramento City College, and and I heard about the California Conservation Corps. I knew that they had centers where you could live, and I saw it as an opportunity to go live in the Bay Area. I lived in Vallejo on Mare Island, and I was there for just a few months before they gave me a second drug test, and I failed it, and I had to leave. They give you a second chance, so about 6 months later, I went back. But it was just me hoping I could get my life together. Honestly, I'm not sure that I did, but I was better leaving the Conservation Corps than when I went in.
Do you want to elaborate at all about, you said that they drug tested you and it came back positive. Do you want to talk about that at all?
Yeah, I mean it was the late '90s, and weed still wasn't legal, and I tested dirty for weed, and then uh, with the first test they give you, you have, I think they give you uh, 2 months, and then they test you again, and if you're positive again, they kick you out. And of course, I was positive again. I was a 19-year-old idiot. And there was I'm surrounded by other 19-year-old idiots who all just wanted to get high or drink, and so the test came back positive, and they booted me out.
So you went into the California Conservation Corps.
Mhm.
Didn't know that existed. That's good. And then, but you lived in a bunch of different places as an adult, right? So do you think the fact that you left home, that you moved around, does that have anything to do with your queerness, your class status? Do you think that matters?
Yes, definitely my class, and almost certainly my queerness. I was working after I left the Conservation Corps. I came back home uh, to Sacramento, and I was working at a place called State Net, which no longer exists. Well, I mean, it does in a different form, different name. Um, and my boss there, it was very obvious that she didn't like me because I was trans, but it was never outright said. My girlfriend at the time even commented on it. It was just this very obvious thing, and she kept sabotaging my work because the work was editing legislative and regulatory text that would get scanned in, and you'd have to make sure that the scanned copy matched, that it was accurate. And I would type these whole paragraphs and save them. Or, my girlfriend at the time, she worked there, so she would type part of the paragraphs for me if I was working on two separate projects. And then the whole paragraph would be gone the next day. And she would say, "Oh, you're not working fast enough. You didn't do this, you didn't do that." And I'm like, "Well, you're right. Somebody else did. And I know they did it, and I know it was done." Um, and she used that as a way to fire me by saying I wasn't productive. Um, but she was the second editor on all of my work, which means she would go in and delete things and then send it back to me and tell me I had to redo it. And I was the only one she was doing this to. And losing that job ultimately led to me and my girlfriend losing our house and moving in with my sister, who lost her house because she was poor as well. And so we all ended up moving to a tiny little town on the edge of Death Valley. And my mom had already moved down there with her boyfriend. And it's you don't live in Darwin and have money. That's poverty. So the town may as well be named Poverty, in my opinion. Um, but it was ultimately my queerness that led to me not having the job, which led to me not working. All right, so no money to pay rent. Um, so I don't know if you want to call that my queerness or my class that started the process of me moving around California. Um, I would say it's probably the intersection of the two.
So when you moved to Darwin, did you move in with your mom because she was already down there?
Uh, I moved onto her property. Her and her boyfriend bought a piece of land out there, and they put a bunch of broken down trailers on it. So I was living in a small gutted trailer, basically, that had a mattress on the floor. That's where me and my girlfriend lived for the first few months we were there. Since my sister moved down there with me, uh, my niece also had a mattress on the floor of our trailer. My nephew was in another trailer. And it doesn't look much different now, and it's been 20 years.
Did you live there for long?
I lived in that trailer in Darwin for, I would say, 4 months. And then we got an apartment in a nearby town, Lone Pine. And we lived there for, I don't know, a year maybe. Then moved around the area, moved to a little town called Independence. We were homeless for a bit in there.
And why were you homeless?
Uh, Partly because I was having trouble working. Not that I couldn't find work, but I was just having trouble doing it. My anxieties were just getting too much to deal with, and the last job I worked down there, I I had a panic attack that felt like a heart attack, and my girlfriend made me go to the hospital. And they told me, "Well, you're not having a heart attack, you're having a panic attack." And my girlfriend said, "Well, you're not going back to work." But that also meant we weren't going to keep our apartment. Um, and then we were both arrested, and it became harder to work. It became harder to hold a job, harder to get a job. So we ended up living in a tent, and I mean, my mom, the one time she kind of just didn't help, didn't support. That was probably the right time. Honestly, she wanted us to fix it ourselves. She knew we dug a hole for ourselves, and so she gave us a tent and said, "Have fun."
So, can you talk a little bit about what that experience was like being homeless? How long you were homeless? Do you think your experience being homeless was shaped by the fact that you were queer? Did you?
So I don't think it was shaped by being queer. I think that experience of homelessness in that town, in that, I mean, it's a small town, and there's a lot of like desert wilderness around. And surprisingly, being queer wasn't an issue for most people there. Like nobody seemed to really care. Um, but it was hard. We were homeless. I think that we were homeless a few times, but that time we were homeless for, I don't know, I want to say like 3 months maybe. We just lived in a tent. It was winter. I remember it snowed on us a few times. We also had a car, so we'd sleep in there if it got too cold. There was a little restaurant in town that we would go to every night, go in the bathroom and change into pajamas and come out. And the guy who worked there was a friend of ours, so he'd make sure we ate, and then we'd go drive up into the hills and sleep. We'll be in the tent or in the car, and just like live our life the rest of the day like we weren't homeless. Just trying to act like everything was all right.
Did you have any interactions with the police when you were homeless?
No, there's not a lot of police interference in Lone Pine. Police just, for the most part, let everyone go. So for being homeless, they wouldn't have known if we were homeless or camping, because there's a lot of camping there too. Um, I mean, I did have interactions with the police, but not for being homeless.
So, I think you've sort of kind of gestured towards this, but I'd like to talk about it a little bit more now. So, can you talk some about your disabilities and how they impact you in the present day and how they've impacted you in the past? Some, I know that's a big question.
Yeah. So I'm on disability. I'm on SSI and Social Security, um, and I originally got on them for my mental health. I had tons of anxiety. I have major depressive disorder. I have ADHD. So it's always been like real hard for me to get things done, to stay focused, to not panic, to be uh, in pressure filled environments. Which, for me, a pressure filled environment isn't what most people think of high pressure. For me, it's just there's a customer that might get angry at me. That feels like a lot of pressure. Um, and then I also have a physical disability, which is Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. So, and I didn't know that was a thing until I was older, until I was in my 30s. I didn't know that's what it was, but it's a connective tissue disorder, and all of my connective tissue is too loose, so my joints dislocate or sublux. Um, but there's a lot of other things that go along with that when you consider like your heart is connective tissue. So much of your body is controlled by muscle and tendon, like everything with your digestive system, everything. So everything gets a little wonky sometimes. And when I was little, I dislocated my knee jumping on a trampoline. I was just jumping, and all of a sudden my knee was out. Um, I had a cousin, an older cousin. He was an adult, but he picked me up by my arm, and my shoulder popped out. You know, it wasn't like he was jerking me around. It was just he grabbed my arm and lifted, and out went my shoulder. Now my elbows do it for the most part, so that limits me on what I can do both in employment and in my personal life, right? Because there are certain movements that will just knock my joints out of place, or they just hurt. So
How would you say that your disabilities influence your identity as queer and vice versa? How do the two intersect?
I think there's a whole big community of disabled queers, and there's a lot that gets overlooked, I think, by the overarching queer community. and the disabled folks kind of had to band together. And I think we there's a lot of mental illness, I think, in the queer community, and I hate saying that because that's always an argument used against us, right? Like we're mentally ill. But I think that the issues come from the way we're treated and being told we're mentally ill, and and constantly being shunned, being harassed, being the victim of violence, whatever it is. All that trauma is just collectively built up in the queer community, and now we're just all kind of holding each other up as disabled queer people, and I think that's a very specific identity, right? Disabled queer. It's not I'm disabled and queer. I'm a disabled queer.
Do you think being queer helped you sort of understand your disabilities, and being disabled helped you understand your queerness at all? Do you think about it in that way?
I think being queer definitely helped me accept my disabilities. I didn't when I came out as queer, I didn't really understand disability, and I wasn't having as many problems. It wasn't as big of a part of my life. But being queer, when you realize you're disabled and you realize the world is treating you a little bit differently because you are, or not treating you differently in some cases, which is a problem. You're used to that as a queer, right? You understand how to navigate the world when people aren't giving you what you need.
Maybe can you talk a little bit about your work history? So you said you've moved around to different jobs, and how is the fact that you're disabled and you're queer, how has that influenced your work history? What have some of your experiences been like?
Most of my work history ended at like the age of 25. So I don't have a lot of like good. I don't want to say good. Good's not the best word for that, but I don't have a lot of like long term solid work history. I have lots of little jobs that I did when I was young, um, like the California Conservation Corps. I did that for a year. I worked at State Net for a year. I worked at Jack in the Box for a few months. I worked at Carl's Jr. for a year. I worked um, as like I did house cleaning for a while. I worked at a gas station. I worked as an environmental service technician at a hospital, which is a fancy way of saying I cleaned rooms. Um, I mean, they were all very short term jobs, and nothing that I kept for very long because I was too anxious to do them or because I was bored. Like, um, yeah, there's not. My work history is almost non-existent until recently. And I'm trying to work again, somewhat successfully. I think I'm just a glorified intern, but it pays and I'm good at it. So
What job do you have now?
I work for the American River College Design Hub. I They have different teams. They do a lot of different things, from video editing to programming. And there's a social justice team, which is the team I'm on. And it really just do whatever they throw at me. The first year I was there, I was working on a land proposal for a tiny house project in Southern California that would be for emancipating foster youth. Um, then there's this year it's been a water quality project, looking at environmental racism and the impacts on water quality and perceptions of water quality based on like race and class.
How do you like your job?
I actually love it. It's it's fun. I don't have a lot of restrictions. If I say, "Hey, let's try this," then chances are they're gonna let me try it. If I want to learn something, uh, I have the freedom to do that. I mean, within reason. They're not gonna let me. They're not gonna pay me, for 30 hours of trying to learn something on my own. But they'll give me the freedom to spend a couple of hours trying to do something on my own, rather than finding someone who could just do it easily, which I really like. I like being in a situation where I'm encouraged to learn how to do something instead of depending on the next department or the next group or the next team to do it.
What's your pay like? Do you get insurance through your job?
I do not get insurance through my job, but I'm still on SSI and Social Security, so I have Medicare. My pay is, I honestly don't know if my pay is good or bad. It's been so long since I've worked. I make more than minimum wage, but I'm not making $30 an hour. So, um, yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's fairly average. I think I have. I think. Oh, that's a horrible statement. I think I have some kind of retirement account, but I don't understand how any of that works.
How old are you?
I am 42.
Better get on that.
Yeah, no joke.
Can you talk a little bit about your current class status?
I would say my current class status is poor. I apparently thrive in poverty. I don't know. I mean, don't make enough working to be off of SSI, so that I think says enough. And SSI doesn't pay anything. I think total, if I weren't working, my SSI, like all my benefits together, would be right around 1,000 a month. Which, if you know where I could rent a place for that, please let me know, because I'm not sure how you rent an apartment and eat on $1,000 a month. But so if they've kept me on SSI, that means I'm not making enough to reach the poverty line, right? I haven't crossed it.
So, what kind of economic struggles do you think you have right now because you're poor still?
Well, I can't live with my partner because I'm poor, and that's, we've been together for almost 2 years, and all we want is to exist in the same house. But they have very cheap rent in their studio apartment, and my roommates have been kind enough to give me a free place to live for now, and I don't have anything to contribute to renting a place because I have a car payment, I have other bills, and so they can't really afford to support both of us. Right? They can't afford a two-bedroom apartment on their own. So, I mean, that's definitely a problem. Ultimately, I mean, it seems like such a silly struggle in that I have a place to live at least, right? But it's still like, it's one of those things you want to do, right? That's what we think about when we're kids. I'm gonna grow up. I'm gonna live with my partner. I'm gonna have a job. I'm gonna be able to go out and eat when I want. And those are not things that disabled people get to do typically.
So, does your class status currently affect your relationship in other ways?
Um, I don't want to say it affects my relationship, but I think it affects the things we can do together. Like, my partner doesn't care that I'm disabled. They don't care that I'm poor, but it does mean we can't take like big expensive trips together. Um, there's a question of Hawaii next year. One of our friends is going to Hawaii for their birthday. They want us to come. I can't really afford to do that, and my partner doesn't want to go without me. So that means either we don't go or they have to pay for me. And that just kind of sucks, right? It's not a good feeling to know that either you have to miss your friend's birthday or go on someone else's dime.
What about your, being poor and the institution of marriage?
I think I mean, I couldn't afford to get married. And I think more so than just poor, there's the disabled aspect, and that there's being queer and being disabled and wanting to get married. It's endlessly impossible. And now that gay marriage is legal, the queers are like, "Yay, we did it, marriage equality." But there's not. There's gay marriage. There's not marriage equality. I can't get married because if I do, my benefits get reduced by I think more than half, but at least half. Right. So if I'm only getting $1,000 a month from Social Security, and I get married, now there's two people, and I get half that because my spouse is expected to take care of me. But my partner doesn't make enough money to do that. My ex was also on Social Security. So they would reduce both of our benefits if we had gotten married. We would have been living on, I believe the limit for two people was $1,200 a month, $1,300. Two people can't live on that. That's not possible. Um, so yeah, I think that ties back into the disabled queer identity, right? That's another aspect of it, is that the abled queers, they marriage equality, we did it. What about the rest of us?
So, how does that make you feel, like when you think about the prospect of getting married? I mean,
It's frustrating, and like I don't need a marriage license, right, to solidify my relationship or feel like it's a permanent situation. But there there's no reason why I shouldn't be able to get one, right? There's no reason why me wanting to spend my life with somebody should impact the amount of money I make, the amount of money I bring in. It should not impact my ability to survive as a human being. Uh, and it does. And it's very disheartening. It's not, and it's important to know that, like, if I live with a partner, Social Security could determine that that's close enough to marriage and take away money. Like, if they know I'm living with someone I love, that I'm living with a partner, I lose money. So it's almost safer for me to not live with my partners. And that is ridiculous.
so I want to talk about education finally. So you're a slightly older community college student, right? You're 42.
Yeah.
Um, can you tell me a little about your educational journey from high school to the present, and why you ultimately chose to go to community college?
I started right out of high school in community college. I went to American River College in 1998, and I went to Sac City. I think I started Sac City in 99. Um, and I in and out of those two schools for a couple of years, and then I ended up needing to move to Darwin, and I ultimately just dropped out of everything. And when I became disabled, when I got on disability, it was never meant to be a permanent situation for me. It was never meant to be how I spent my life. But I knew living in Darwin in the desert, nothing around, that's kind of where I was at the moment. And that's ultimately why I came back to Sacramento, so I could go back to school. And you can take one class and go, can I do this? Is my mental health good enough for me to maintain one class? And then if it is, that's great. Can I add another class the next semester? And so that's kind of, and the cost is also why I lean towards community college. And I was also lucky in that I could go through the Department of Rehabilitation, and they'll pay for my classes. But I only did that short term because it was a constant pushback from my counselor there to do more, get through faster, get it done, do more, do more, do more. And I'm like, I didn't have priority registration. All my classes were filling up. I was still getting A's. I was still doing my work, but I couldn't do enough for her. So I closed my case there and just started going on my own, and that was in 2011, I believe, is when I came back to American River College. And uh, I like that it's smaller. Um, there's a whole variety of students that have just come from these different places in life, and I think we all kind of connect in that way, that we're struggling to find our place. Um, for whatever reason, whether it's because you can't afford to go to a 4 year right away, or you're older like me, and that's why I like it. I like the community college community. So it made sense for me to start there. And I'd never intended on getting a degree, which sounds ridiculous. But there was a certificate I was aiming for when I went back to school in electronics technology. And I did not complete that certificate. I completed two other certificates in electronics technology, but not the one I was trying to get. And then I took a philosophy class, and that was a huge mistake because I immediately knew I wanted to study philosophy. And I wasn't taking social science classes. I wasn't taking humanities classes. I was only in electronics, and this one class just hooked me. And then I was like, well, this anthropology class looks interesting. So I took that class, and then I immediately knew I wanted to get my anthropology degree. And the anthropology professor, who's amazing, I don't know, can I name names? uh, this Professor Casper Denman, who has been an amazing support. I sat down in her office one day and I said, "Tell me about anthropology." She went like this. And I was like, "Uh-oh." I knew in my head, so I was like, "I'm in trouble." She goes, "Guess what?" I said, "What?" She said, "You're an anthropology major now." I don't know what anthropology is. She goes, I don't care. You're an anthropology major." And she was right. I I finished the philosophy degree and the anthropology degree first, and then I thought, well, I've taken a million classes. How close am I to the next degree? Um, and I was two classes away from my sociology degree, so I took those classes and I did that. And then they added the social justice studies degrees, two of them, and I was only a few classes from those, so I took those, and it's just been this endless cycle of me realizing I'm close to this degree. Let's get it, because that means I don't have to actually move on. I don't have to take the step and be afraid. So I've been at ARC for, I don't know, 12 years now, and I'm currently a student at Sac City too. But I did finally apply for Sac State and got accepted, and I'll be transferring there in fall. So,
How do you feel about that?
oh, I'm terrified. I'm certain that I've missed something. I don't know what I'm doing. I have no idea if I should be doing something right now, and I'm too anxious to reach out to somebody who might know.
Uh, what do you think you're going to major in at Sac State? Do you know?
So I had to put sociology as my major, but that I don't know that that's where I want to land. Um, but I was aiming for the Women and Gender Studies program, and for some reason the social justice studies, was it Women and LGBTQ Studies degree at ARC, even though it's a transfer degree, doesn't qualify you for a transfer into the Women and Gender Studies program. So if since it doesn't transfer, it was telling me that like I couldn't just easily transfer into that. It would require a review of my transcripts and all of these other things. And I said, well, I'm just gonna throw sociology on there for now and get this application in before the deadline at midnight, and then I'll figure it out from there.
So, What do you think you want to end up doing for your career? Do you think the fact that you are queer will impact your career at all?
Oh, it absolutely will. I want to work in some kind of advocacy or activism role, but I don't like being upfront. I don't like being the face of things. I don't like being the center of attention. So it will probably be maintaining some kind of database or data entry or something mundane and repetitive, which is what I'm good at. I can hyper focus like no one's business. But I want whatever I'm doing. I want it to. I want what I think everybody wants. I want it to make a difference. I don't think I'm unique in that. I'm not sure that we all land there, but I'm hoping that's where I land.
So you've been at ARC for a while. What has your experience been like being queer and trans over the years, and has that shifted over time?
Oh, it has
That's a big question.
absolutely has shifted. In 2011, when I started, I was in electronics technology, and I did not pass. I did not look like I do now. I did not have a beard. I had not had top surgery. I am guessing that I looked like a very butch lesbian with a lot of facial hair, but not a full beard. And that was interesting, especially in electronics technology that's heavily dominated by assigned male people, or presumably assigned male people. Um, and I would look around the room and realize I think I'm the only female bodied person in here. Um, and then my professor didn't know how to refer to me. And so instead of just asking, like, well, even something as rude as "What are you?" would have been better than some of the things he did. Like I walked up to his desk one day in the middle of the lab to ask a question, and he said, "Yes, sir, ma'am, or whatever." Well, all right. Well, that was aggressive, but thank you. And I said, "Sir is correct," and he just huffed. And what do you want? All right. But we've gone from that, which was a really unpleasant experience, to having a pride center on campus. Right? That didn't exist when I first started. I didn't. There was a club, an LGBTQ club, but I didn't know about it. I don't. And I talked to so many queers at that time. Once I found out about it, I said, "Did you know there's a club on campus?" And everybody's like, "No." Like none of us knew. So I don't even know how there was a club. It wasn't advertised. And I kind of wonder, like, was that by design, right? Did they not advertise because it wasn't necessarily safe to know? Was it to have the location and date terribly public? Like that, I mean, gatherings of queers kind of scary sometimes, right? Get us all in one place, we're an easy target. So I don't know if that was by design, but I think we didn't have a community then in 2011 on campus. I would see people from a distance and go, "Hey, I'm pretty sure you're in my community," or I'd see a rainbow or a subtle trans flag or a pronoun pin, and I'm like, right, but we can't really interact because we don't have community here. And now I'm seeing this community grow on campus, which has been great. I've watched the Pride Center get built. I watched the preferred name thing change, because I had the hardest time changing my name on campus. And so even when I passed, even when I looked like I do, when I signed in and signed out of the computers, my dead name would be right there, like just in everyone's face. If anybody walked past me in the lab or I had a lab partner, I tried to make them sign in because I didn't want anyone to see the name that was there. It didn't match me. It didn't match what I said. And I legally changed my name, but I still couldn't get it changed on the computers. It would still log me in and out as my dead name. And now I think that I'm hoping that's changed with the preferred name situation we have. Um, I should actually ask about that.
So you had this one experience with that one faculty member who was very unfriendly. Did you early on have similar experiences with other faculty or that were similarly disheartening or felt bad in different ways?
I think in electronics technology, there was just this overall vibe of I don't fit, right, from the professors. Like I definitely felt like they weren't thrilled with me being present in their classrooms. I think if I went now, looking the way I look, I would be much more accepted. So I think that there was a lot of microaggressions that I didn't quite pick up on, but also felt. Right, like I understood that I'm not particularly welcome here, and that was very disheartening. It didn't stop me. Ultimately, what stopped me in electronics technology was that I found out I did not want to do it as a career. I didn't want to know. Um, I would have been persistent, and I think the fact that they didn't, I felt like I wasn't wanted there, made me want to be there more.
But did you feel a sense of isolation when
Oh,
you were in
absolutely,
these classes and you felt like you didn't belong and your faculty not
absolutely.
only didn't make an effort to understand you or your identity, but were actively hostile in some ways?
Yeah, I absolutely felt isolated. I made one friend in all of the classes I took there, and I was in electronics technology for almost 3 years. I was in that little area of campus in those classes with the same three professors. I made one friend, and that was uh, a girl who was the only girl in those classes, the only girl I ever encountered in those classes. Everyone else just wouldn't. They wouldn't talk to me. They wouldn't have anything to do with me. If we had to have partners, if they weren't assigned partners, chances are I wasn't going to get a partner, or it was going to be me and some other awkward person standing around going, "I guess it's us," because nobody wanted to interact with me.
So, what do you think faculty can do to make queer and trans students feel more respected and included in the classroom?
They can learn. Like that's I think the biggest thing. Just learn. Like I'm not I'm not Google. I'm not the trans Wikipedia. Um, I shouldn't have to be the one to educate these professors. It shouldn't fall to me to say no. This is my name and you have to use it. It shouldn't fall to any trans person or queer person to say, hey, maybe don't say ladies and gentlemen. Um, so it it's as simple as Googling, right? That there's plenty of workshops available, um, and ask, like, yeah, I'm not trans Wikipedia, but if you want to know my pronouns, ask me. If you're unsure of how to approach something, ask me. I would much rather you go, what are your pronouns? I would much rather you tell me that I don't pass than to assume you know who I am based on what you see.
So, have you had experiences being misgendered over the course of your time at American River College and in the district?
Early on, yes, I was misgendered a lot because I didn't fit the mold, right? I didn't particularly look male. And that's a problem. Why does how I look matter to anyone? Like if I show up in a dress, you don't get to determine my identity because of a piece of clothing I'm wearing. Um, so yeah, a lot of assumptions are made, and it seems even more ridiculous when if you could look at me and say, well, that person very obviously has breasts, but they're also growing facial hair and they're wearing typical men's clothes, maybe ask them, right? Like, um, so it was very frustrating early on when people just made the assumption. Um, and I get it. I mean, it's been ingrained in us. I still make assumptions, but then I ask. Um, and I think that's where it's okay to mess it up. It's okay to make assumptions, but at some point you have to own that and be more open to learning.
So why is it so important to use the correct pronouns for trans and non-binary people, do you think?
Because who I am and my existence is real, and whether or not you approve of it doesn't particularly matter because I'm a human being and I deserve respect. Um, you like everyone wants respect. We just want to exist in our own identities, and that's what everybody wants. I don't think any like Catholic would want me to go up to him and be like, "Well, I don't believe in Catholicism, so you're pagan." That I don't think that's gonna work, and it certainly doesn't work for trans people and our identities.
What does it feel like to be misgendered?
Uh, it's very difficult to describe, but I think imagine you woke up tomorrow and you're you with all of your knowledge, all of your experiences, but everyone you meet is calling you by your spouse's name and assuming that you know everything they know and that you don't know all the things you do know. They assume you do your spouse's job. They assume you have your spouse's degree. They assume you are your spouse's gender if it's different from your own. Like, they have stripped you of your identity and said you are this person now. We don't care what you're saying. We don't care that you're telling us we're wrong. You're your spouse. Like, imagine how frustrating that would be to have your identity just suddenly ripped away. It's that, but every day.
So what do you think the college could do better when it comes to respecting people's gender identity and, you know, as well as their sexual orientation?
Listen to the students. Ask the students. Stop having what I assume happens at every place of business, every workplace, is the equity workshops where you talk about how to treat trans people, how to treat queers, how to be sensitive to black folks. Stop. Ask the students. We're the ones that it affects. We're the ones that know what we need, and that's going to change over time. So you can't just ask the students today. You have to ask the students every day. I mean, not obviously not literally. You're not going to take a survey every day, but we know what we need. There are plenty of us willing to teach, willing to like gather resources. And I know earlier I said like, I'm not queer Wikipedia, right? I'm not trans Wikipedia, but also like that's a broader statement for the trans community. Don't expect that burden to fall on us. Don't expect that we're here to teach you, but there's plenty of us willing to do so. And if the school just put out that call, like, hey, can we get a group of diverse queers to come put a workshop together for the faculty, I can guarantee you would not only have yourselves inundated with queers willing to help, you'd also have a free workshop for faculty. I think that gets the colleges to respond, right? Free. Not gonna cost you anything.
Can you talk some about your experiences taking courses that either wholly or in part focus on queer or trans topics?
I mean, I've taken quite a few that had a small focus on queer and trans topics. There's the obvious introduction to LGBTQ studies. That one probably the most comprehensive, I would think and hope. And then there's anthropology of sex, sexuality, and gender, which touched on the subject of gender and being trans and other identities within other cultures, because a lot of cultures don't have the idea of trans. Right? They do have a third gender. Um, the sociology class, which I never remember the name of, it's like gender relations in American society or something. That touched on the idea of being trans, but not as much as one would hope. And I don't know if it was professor specific or if it's class specific. But I think it's very hard to have a class about gender and gender relations without a bigger focus on the trans community. And that one kind of was lacking a bit. And I had to define cisgender for the rest of the students because the professor couldn't explain it in a way that everyone else could understand. And that was a bit problematic, I think. Human sexuality covered it a little bit, but that was more about sexuality, so not so much with the trans folks. Which I mean does make sense, and that I would rather people not think that being trans is a sexuality, but there's not. I guess there's not a lot of other classes I've taken that really hit on queerness in general. Women's history did, but I don't think that's in every women's history class. I think that might have been the specific professor.
So, how important do you think it is to include trans and queer topics in the curriculum for students who identify as queer and trans?
It's life saving. I mean, earlier when I was talking about coming out as trans, what did I say? It took one friend, one representation of me to help me be who I was. I would have killed myself had I not come out. Like, had I not finally come to understand that I could be who I wanted to be, I would not be here right now. And I think a class that says, hey, there's this trans person who did this thing. It doesn't matter what it is. This trans person did this thing. You can do this thing. This trans person existed. You can exist. That's a huge statement that it's such a small action. But it could genuinely save someone's life. And so I can't imagine why you wouldn't include queer and trans topics. Like, what do we lose by including them? What is gained by excluding them?
So, if you could, at the community college level, would you take additional courses focused on queer and trans topics?
Absolutely. I would enroll in them next semester while at Sac State.
And if you had, if you could imagine what classes might be offered, what classes would you like to take?
I mean, frankly, any. I might not take a writing class, only because I'm very tired of writing. um, I might not take like a queer literature class, although I would be interested in doing so. It's just I don't have a lot of time for reading, but I know plenty of other folks who would absolutely love a queer literature class. I know plenty of folks who would love a writing class that focused on queer topics. I there's not a class I could think of that wouldn't be well received by the queer community. The problem is getting the word out and getting people in them. Um, because I think a lot of times there's the people who are like, hell yeah, queer class, I'm taking that, and then there are other people who are like, does that automatically identify me as queer by going to these classes? And that can be scary still.
I think, you know, at colleges, 4-year colleges and universities that have a more robust offering of courses, there are courses like Black studies, Black queer studies, you know, trans studies, queer health studies, queer disability studies, these kinds of courses. And at our campus, it seems to me that the only course that's currently focused on, or there's two courses. It's Intro to LGBTQ Studies and Queer Literature, and
Oh,
that's not always offered.
yeah, I was gonna say that I've not heard of that one, which is kind of disheartening.
Used to be offered once a year at ARC.
Hmm.
Yeah, the professor who taught it retired, but just recently. Now it's offered at CRC. I'm not sure how frequently. So yeah, I guess in that list of classes, I'm sure there are other classes I could name. Do any of those classes, those topics, strike you as interesting?
Oh, absolutely, all of them, uh, especially like queer and disability, like that. And I mean, that's my identity, right? That's my intersection. So of course that interests me. And there's no that I'm aware of no classes at ARC that focus on ability, right? There's no disability rights history class. I mean, I'd be very surprised if I were wrong about that. We've got social justice classes, we've got Black history classes, we've got Chicano history classes. There's no disability classes, and there are very few professors I have seen include that in their classes. So that like yeah, disabled queer studies, sign me up. I'll take it this summer.
So what have faculty done in courses that aren't focused on queer and trans topics to make you feel included and welcome?
I had one professor who day one didn't just ask for pronouns, which that is incredibly helpful to make everyone identify their pronouns, because now it's not up to the queers, it's not up to the trans folks to say, hey, that's not my pronouns. We don't have to immediately out ourselves. You're just asking everyone. But this professor sent around a piece of paper and said, please write your preferred name and your pronouns. Uh, that that was great. And I had another professor who said, please, I just out loud, please identify yourself with your preferred first name and your legal last name. That immediately removed the problem of dead naming someone. And it really is just that little thing, that little like, hey, everyone tell me your pronouns. Not just, if you use different pronouns, let me know. Just ask everybody. Cis folks can take the burden off of us for a minute by doing that. And when the professors not require, but ask that, it tells us that you understand that like not everyone identifies the way you might assume. And that just in itself tells me you're a safe person for me to be in a room with, at least. Because if you're willing to care about pronouns, you probably aren't in your personal life spewing anti-trans rhetoric somewhere, right? You're probably safe for me to weigh that on campus. Yeah, I think that it really is as simple as just them being human. Like, just be a decent human.
So, do you think you've ever struggled academically, specifically as a queer trans person? Have you ever not done as well as you wanted to, dropped classes, or even failed classes?
Yeah. When I was getting ready to have my top surgery, I I had a semester where I just dropped all of my classes except for I think one. I think it was that philosophy class I fell in love with, but I dropped everything else because I couldn't focus. I couldn't I couldn't stand existing on campus and knowing that I was still being seen as female because I had breasts and they were far too large to try to hide them, um, despite my many attempts. So I knew that everywhere I went, I was getting weird looks. Right, I was this breasted person with wispy facial hair and uh, just I must have I'm as I would think to these people looked confusing and bizarre. But those aren't words you want to associate with yourself, right? That's not how you want to think people are viewing you. And so that it made me not want to exist in public um, as much as I did. It made me want to withdraw. And so I did. I dropped a bunch of classes and I just kind of hid out until I could get my top surgery.
In general, what makes you excited to learn in the classroom? What motivates you to learn?
Professors who are excited about what they're teaching. That's truly what gets me excited in a classroom. That's that's what got me in that philosophy class. That's what got me in anthropology. That's what's gotten me every time. That's what's gotten me. In that philosophy class, I asked a question that it was just a simple question, and that professor started jumping up and down, literally in front of the board, screaming, "Yes, yes, yes!" And that's it. When I see someone excited to teach me what they know, that makes me want to learn because that tells me this subject is at least enjoyable to someone, right? Like, um, and it tells me I'm going to learn a lot from you because you actually care about it.
So, what do you think the college should do to make trans and queer students feel more included on campus in general? So, structurally speaking, in terms of its policies and trainings, just in general.
Include us. Yeah, that I mean, to make us feel more included, include us. Um, I mean, I genuinely don't know the answer to this question. Who's consulted when determining what bathrooms are in a building? Is there? I mean, I know there are laws that regulate it. I know that men's rooms have to have a certain number of urinals, which is just whatever. That's a whole other issue. Um, but like, has anyone said, hey, how many people on this campus might support all gender bathroom? Has anyone asked the queers how they would feel about that? Because that's not just a trans issue, right? It's people who don't fit into the binary. That's very masculine women. That's very effeminate men. That's not just a trans problem. That's a people problem. I would certainly prefer to go into an all gender bathroom where I'm going to encounter everyone and not have myself questioned. Because it's not then you don't belong in this bathroom, right? It's we all belong in this bathroom. Who cares what you look like? Just go pee. But I don't think that anyone considers that. I don't think that anyone outside of the Pride Center is asking what the queers think. What about uh, services? How is the language? I know in the past I don't use a lot of services these days because I've been around for so long, but I know in the past there was just male female. Um, has that been updated? And who did they talk to when deciding how the form should look? Did they include the queer students? Do they ever ask us what we need? So just and I think this applies across the board to all of the, the at risk oppressed groups, right? Like the school could put together easily a panel of people that included disabled people, queer people, black people, Muslim people, like, and then that group could go around and find the places where things aren't equitable and make recommendations. I'm telling you, there's no shortage of students, but they don't ask us.
So you talked a little bit about bathrooms. Are there other ways that you think our campus or colleges in the district more broadly reinforce the gender binary? And can you think of anything else that our colleges can do better to challenge the binary to be more inclusive of trans and non-binary and other students?
I don't know about as an institution. I don't know about systemically how the forms have changed. I don't know. I'm certain there's male and female locker rooms somewhere, right? Or showers, whatever ARC has. And I mean, I'm clearly been working out my whole life, so I would know these things. uh, I don't. I know that the idea of merging the two or having an all gender anything gets a lot of pushback, and I understand, but I think it comes from a mistaken understanding of how it would work, and um, so that I don't know as far as forms, as far as like institutional processes, what's happening like with things being gendered. I know that in classrooms there's a lot of ladies and gentlemen, there's a lot of husband and wife, son or daughter, and we don't need those. You could say, hey folks, you could say spouse, you could say your children, um, because then my partner's not excluded, because even if I marry my partner, they are not a husband or a wife. that there's you've excluded them if you ask me about my husband or wife. You excluded them if you ask me about my boyfriend or girlfriend. And when you exclude them, you exclude me because I'm also part of that community. So I think gendered language is definitely a problem. Microaggressions in general have been a problem. Um, I don't. Yeah, I can't really speak to systemically because it's been so long since I've had to apply for anything or do anything.
So how important is queer community for your own sense of well-being at the college? And how important do you think queer community might be in general?
I think for the college, it's hugely important. I can't. I can't describe how lonely it can be when you're the only person you see like you in a space. Like I know there's a lot of groups that get it, right? There's a lot of people who look around and go, I'm the only blank in this room. But if you haven't experienced that, it is lonely. And being able to see your community, having a place where you can go and be like, these are my people. These people understand what just happened to me in this class or what happened to me yesterday at home. Having that outlet is huge. I don't think we can put a value on that.
Okay, so finally, in general, what makes you excited about being a college student? Just in general.
You know, it used to be the end goal, right? Which was the prospect of more money, a better job, or any job for me, right? Like being able to work, proving that I could do it. But really, it's learning, it's interacting with other people, it's seeing the diversity. It's like I was a very different person when I started at ARC 12 years ago. I have grown so much, and that is what has made me excited to continue all of these years. And I know I'm bringing down the school ratings, right? I need to transfer, but I think it speaks volumes for the professors I encounter and the other students I encounter that I'm still there, that I want to be there. Um, and that's it. Like, I think, and that's, I think the beauty of community college is I can just be there and I can have these experiences with people and I can learn and I can grow and I can find acceptance for people that I didn't know much about because I never encountered them. Right? I've learned so much and I've encountered so many amazing professors that's what keeps me excited to learn and that's what keeps me coming back. So maybe if you all just weren't so great, I would have transferred by now. So really it's your fault.
Okay, now I'm going to ask a very specific question randomly. Do you think it would be helpful if there were a mental health counselor that specialized in helping queer and trans students at the college?
Absolutely. That there's no question. Yes. Having a mental health counselor who understands the nuances of navigating queerness is so important. Like, if you're having marital problems, you go to a counselor who specializes in that, right? You're not going to go to a counselor whose primary focus is ADHD. Like, that's not going to help you and your spouse. So why on earth wouldn't I want a counselor who understands my specific needs, who understands my experiences, never mind my needs? You can't help my future if you don't understand my past. Everything I do today is informed by yesterday. So as a counselor, if you understand what I might have been through last semester as a queer on campus, you can help me navigate next semester better. You can help me navigate my life tomorrow better. You can help me understand why a specific event happened. I don't think that uh, just any counselor is capable of that.
So another more specific question: can you think of any way that the college can better support low income trans students in particular, low income queer students more broadly?
Give us money. um, I, I mean, genuinely, that's ultimately it. Uh, there are, the school doesn't have a lot of scholarships that are queer specific, if any. I don't recall seeing any, but I might have missed them. There's not a lot of queer or trans specific aid at all, financially speaking. Um, I don't know
Like
beyond
legal
that.
support for name
Yes,
changes?
yes, actually, that is a brilliant idea. Um, because that is a costly process sometimes. Uh, my partner has to change their name twice because they were adopted and they have, well, like, kind of adopted. They have a birth name and they have a name that it was not legally changed to, but they've been called their whole life. And now it has to just all be merged together. So they have to go through two different name changes. And that's an incredible cost to them. So offering, yeah, I mean, we have a legal studies program. I'm sure there's somebody who could help navigate that and help find the like fee waivers and things like that, and then offering resources to those who don't qualify for fee waivers.
We have the final couple of minutes here, but anything else you'd like to add? Anything in general? Any questions you'd like to return to?
No, I think you've pretty well covered everything. I mean, you somehow got me to talk for at least 2 hours, and that's unheard of for me.